In today's episode of the Pathfind Presents podcast, I have an interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Davies. He's hailing over as a marketing manager at AssessFirst. And AssessFirst is a in a very interesting space, that's for sure. Basically, looking into the predictive hiring space, providing B2B technology in order to help first guys to actually grow their teams with their people. So we want to really deep dive what AssessFirst is actually all about. How it's being used, but also how Jack is thinking about growth for the company. So Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Welcome to me. Yeah, thank you.
Of course. So maybe give us a quick overview. What is AssessFirst all about in your own words?
Yeah, sure. So AssessFirst is essentially in the behavioral assessments space and psychometrics. But essentially, AssessFirst helps businesses to understand who people really are through three key questionnaires or assessments. So that's personality, motivations, and the cognitive ability of people. So these are assessments that we call shape, drive, and brain. And then based on that, you can really get to the heart of who your candidates could be before you hire them, or even your existing team members before you kind of create project teams, for example. And then the really cool thing about AssessFirst, and one of the reasons why I joined around 18 months ago, was kind of using that benchmark of who people are and stacking that up against some machine learning and some AI to understand actually, well, now that we know who these people are they actually going to be successful in those roles? Are they going to be motivated in those roles? Which obviously then is the bit that is really of interest to the businesses that we work with. So
interesting. Is there sort of like a certain size or a certain sort of pipeline of applicants that company would need in order to sort of benefit the most from AssessFirst? Is there who is sort of an ideal customer in a way?
yeah, so it's and this is the wrong answer really as a marketer, but it is super broad. There are businesses that use us that are very small, so startups, and a lot of my background kind of in startups, either in marketing or sales, hiring is so key because you have less people, and every single person that you hire has to be kind of in the top right hand corner of your performance grid box where they're high performance and high potential, where they can grow. So because of that, we actually get some really small businesses, I'm talking like 5 to 10 people, that use us because recruitment is so key to their first 12, 18 months growth and runway. But then at the other end of the scale, there's huge businesses and consultancies and the PwCs of this world that are working with us. From my perspective as a marketer, and actually if I put myself in the customer's shoes, there's benefits for loads of different sizes. But actually, because we charge on a per license basis rather than per assessment, commercially, we're probably most attractive to businesses that are hiring more people. So volume hiring, retail, hospitality, travel, the care sector, public sector, where they're hiring lots of people and they want to bring psychometrics or behavioral assessments very early into their recruitment process to get through all of these applications, but try and find the right people. So any business, any size, but from my perspective, and I think about value proposition, bigger businesses hiring more people are probably the people that benefit the most in terms of ROI.
Makes sense. Does that mean sort of that typically like an HR lead itself would discover the product, or is it more like a bottom up approach, or is it that new employees bring it in because they had the experience? Sort of basically, I'm trying to see like who's the champion within an organization typically for AssessFirst.
Yeah, so it varies slightly from territory to territory because I think the setup of HR is quite different. So I'm mainly focused right now on helping AssessFirst with the team there grow into the UK. So there, it usually is the talent acquisition leads, and it would be the same over in the US, like talent acquisition leads, heads of recruitment, because they tend to sit slightly separately to the HR function. Now, our market is much more developed in France. So in France, for example, you find that it's the HR leads that are usually the entry point. So it can vary, but yeah, it's usually heads of HR, or in new territories, it tends to be those kind of heads of talent acquisition, like I say. And then the interesting thing that you mentioned there about that bottom up approach. So there's around 5 million people that have taken the AssessFirst assessments. Some of those have taken it of their own kind of free will, just because they want to understand a bit more about who they are, and it's free. So if anybody's watching and they want to go and discover who they are, it's a free solution. those people, yeah, you're absolutely right. Sometimes they bring it into the business. So if you're a job seeker and you're trying to differentiate in the market, and this is actually how I found AssessFirst, because I was mentoring people and I was like, hey, you should check this out. This can differentiate you in the market when you're looking for jobs. People are turning up to interviews and saying, I know you've not asked for this, but by the way, here's this really in-depth
Oh,
behavioral profile of who I am.
that's pretty good.
So, and I think that we'll see more of that because the job market and the future of work is changing so rapidly. I think that we'll see more of that bottom-up approach where hiring managers are seeing candidates coming through the doors with their assess first profiles. But for now, yeah, talent acquisition leads, I think, is probably the main one.
Very cool. That makes a very good first impression, I would say, if you come in with your own assessment and hand it over. That's a pretty
Yeah,
good
yeah.
first move. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So what do you think? How do these folks actually learn about sort of the HR leaders that use AssessFirst? How do they learn about AssessFirst? What's their journey like? Or in other words, what are the key client acquisition channels you guys leverage?
Yeah, so again, different by territory slightly because we are the market leader in France, and I think it's fair to say right now our brand is not as well known in the UK. So if I talk specifically about the UK, honestly, like events is such a key channel for us. I think the the appetite for events was completely taken away through the pandemic, and then was sort of reshaped through a virtual event structure. Then the back end of 2020, as events companies tried to figure out how they were going to adapt. I definitely think now we're at the point where there's an appetite for in-person events again, as well as that virtual. And in both scenarios, we see kind of real growth through those channels because you can have a level of personalized engagement that you maybe just can't get through content channels on LinkedIn, for example. So that is really effective. And also, I just think it gives a level of legitimacy, to show there's people there that really understand the science and the psychology behind the solution that we're providing to HR leaders or recruitment leaders. And to kind of be in person and have those conversations and not just have an ebook is important. But that said, of course, we do pump our LinkedIn content channels, and whether that's producing research, reports, ebooks, things that are genuinely going to try and add value to the community, that then acts as an acquisition channel for us where we generate those leads. I'm under no illusions as a marketer and ex-sales that we're casting quite a big net.
Mhm.
And, it follows that when you do that, there's going to be a lot of leads in there which probably aren't that close to our ICP, which is where we then kind of turn to a little bit of marketing automation to try to filter out that big net to an ICP. And when we get to that point, then it's down to our SDR team to try to cultivate and nurture those leads into kind of sales conversations. And that also is a super channel for us. We do use Google Ads. That generally is to try and drive our inbound leads through like free trials and live demos, bread and butter stuff for a lot of SaaS applications. It is effective. But again, when we come back to that legitimacy piece, which is really one of the core focuses for me in the UK right now, that is probably a secondary channel to where we really need to focus, which is more on the events and that direct engagement.
Very cool. Okay, that gives a sort of a very good overview of what you guys are doing. What role do you think the website plays, like in their journey of getting started? How do you, as a marketer, think about the website with that sort of diversified channels that you were describing?
Yeah, I need to think about it more. Because I think a website is like any piece of technology or art. I mean, you can always think of ways that it can be, improved and evolved or even ripped up and kind of started over. Um, I think there's a couple of purposes that it serves. One is just as a straight up acquisition channel. Like if people are already familiarized with the solution, so whether that's through an event or through an ebook or whatever it might be, there's the dark matter of offline buying behaviors in WhatsApp groups which go around and Slack channels that you never see as a marketer and you can never really attribute back. But what ends up happening, and we see it, is people don't come to the website to learn. They just come in because they've already done their learning elsewhere in their communities, in their Slack channels, in their WhatsApps, in their signals, wherever it's going to be. And they just come into the website because they know the button they're going to hit, which is going to be free trial, live demo, or send a contact request. So sometimes it just acts like a doorway, essentially. But of course, that's not everybody. There are people that want to come in and learn. So then it also acts as a place just to hold, our white papers. Our product is super intuitive and easy to learn, but people can go really deep into it because of the psychology and the science. And
Yeah.
actually, if you go into HR, you might not necessarily be an expert in psychology, but you might be super interested in it. So it acts as a resource hub as well for people to educate themselves in ways that directly maybe influence their decision to buy AssessFirst or help them if they've already bought it, but maybe indirectly just maybe help them in their careers develop an expertise in machine learning and in psychological behaviors that determine whether people are going to be successful in certain roles. So it acts as an education hub as well. They're probably the two main ones. I mean, there's loads of other stuff I could go into, but none of it's kind of rocket science, I guess, in terms of where it's at right now.
That makes sense. I mean, since we now spoke about what you guys are doing, who you're serving, spoke a bit about sort of the channels, we spoke about the website. I would love to learn a little bit more about your journey as a marketer, right? First thing I'm curious about is there's so much content out there for marketers where you could endlessly educate yourself, books, podcasts, as we were saying, communities and groups. Where do you personally like to learn? Like, what's your favorite go-to place to get high quality information on growth marketing?
Yeah. So yes, there's a couple of bits in that really. Like, I guess first thing is that my journey as a marketer. So my background was sales management, and being a sales exec and kind of doing that gig, and I enjoyed it, and I was relatively good at it, and I always hold my hands up to say I could have done that for the next 30 or 40 years, but I got to a point where I realized I was never going to be. It didn't motivate me to be the best in the world at sales, and it just didn't make sense anymore for me to pursue that, because ultimately my biggest gripe as a salesperson was I didn't have enough leads. As I think most salespeople will say, I just need more leads. And it was actually a startup I was working for at the time. It was like, well, you keep complaining you haven't got enough leads to work with. Why don't you go and make your own and then give them to the SDR team? And that was sort of the transition for me into marketing. It wasn't particularly well planned or thought out, but it made sense for the business at the time, and it totally made sense for me. And so what I did was I rushed straight into all the acquisition channels, right? So I was like, right, well, let's get a bot, let's change the Google ads. And I went straight in at the tactical level, which was fine, and it generated leads, but you can soon start to see the wheels come off if you just dive straight in at the tactical level. And so in answer to your question about how I learn, I basically got myself enrolled with the Chartered Institute of Marketing over in the UK, and it's a bit old fashioned. I know that the CIM are not going to like me saying that. Certainly my experience was, we were in a college, we were in person at the time. It was a bit traditional, it was a bit old fashioned, but the structures and the frameworks that I learned through the Chartered Institute about how to think about brand, how to think about your competitive environment, how to think about what your growth strategy is going to be according to all of these things that you've got in play, and looking at it strategically, it meant that I still had all that kind of hunger to be really active in the acquisition tactical channels, because that's what salespeople care about. They don't really care so much about the marketing strategy. But in doing that through the CIM and still following a lot of their content, and actually going back and reading things by, Ansoff back in the 60s, which are really tired, but they still hold up. The principles of marketing still hold up, even with Web 3.0, they will still hold up. And so I kind of just, go through a lot of those resources, read books, and use the CIM as my base, and then go out from there.
Very cool. To slowly wrap it up for today, as we're getting towards the end of the interview, I would have some rapid fire questions to get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready for those? They're harmless though, I should say.
Okay, fine. Very
good. What is the last book that you read?
Oh.
Or the last podcast you listened to, for that matter. You can choose, actually.
Actually, the last book that I read was The $1 Trillion Coach. So not particularly marketing, not particularly sales, but it was all about, people can go and check it out. But basically a guy that had coached big execs in some of the biggest businesses in the world, Google, Facebook, etc., And it was just kind of about him and the way that he saw business and saw the world, and also kind of saw leadership. So yeah, I got a lot from that.
What's one single thing your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Thing we are focused on the most, I think it all comes down to UX. So I think one of the differentiators for us as a business versus, psychometrics and psychology in business has been around for a long time, and it's been around in sport potentially for even longer. But it's quite archaic. It's like usually Excel spreadsheets or workshops, and you've got to go off site for a day and then find out if you're red or green or blue. I mean, a lot of us have done that kind of stuff. With AssessFirst, it's all about UX. And so it's speed and it's fun and it's gamified, but you've still got to keep that scientific kind of validation behind it. So that's the thing we're focused on: getting faster, getting more accessible, but keeping the science.
Very cool. And for the very last question, what I would like to do is actually do a little bit of time travel, right? You mentioned actually already the education with the CIM. If we actually go a couple of steps back, right? If we go to, let's say, Cardiff University, back to the days. Now you're heading out of formal education into the world of sales and growth, and you've been a founder as well. What would be the one advice you would give yourself for your career?
Community, really, which I think is, again, because I've been involved in several startups in some capacity or other, either directly or as a consultant. And I think the thing that differentiates successful startups or businesses or people from those that are not is usually to do with the community around them. Now, they can be digital communities, they can be online, or they can be in person, or they can be a mixture of both. But those that can surround themselves, and if I could go back, I think if I'd have surrounded myself with not like-minded people, but people that would have pushed me and challenged me earlier in my career, that would have, I think, benefited me a lot. As it was, as you often do out of uni, especially with a degree like English literature, where you're not quite sure what you want to do unless you become a teacher or a journalist, you end up kind of just taking a job, maybe balancing that with some passions, and the relationships you have around you, they can be a little bit sporadic. And had I surrounded myself with 3 or 4 people that were super interested in tech and super interested in tech for good, I think I would have had more purpose through my early 20s than perhaps I did. But I think I've got there eventually. So
gotcha. Oh, that makes a lot of sense, Jake. I really appreciate you took the time with us today to be a guest on Pathmark Presents. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about AssessFirst, what's the one thing that they should remember?
It's the fastest, most advanced way that you can discover who you really are for free.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathmark Presents.
Thanks, man. Take care. Bye-bye.